Well, before we start this shoot, I definitely have to throw it out to a sponsor, Barbershop here in the Westford Village. As you can see by my new hairdo, they hooked me up before the episode. They wanted to keep it simple. They have 4 barbers in the chair now. Those guys are flying. They're working fast. Awesome haircuts. Beer and a haircut under $30. Westford Village, hit them up. It's the best haircut in town, hands down. So let's just get right into it. Matt Riche. I feel like a kid in a candy store today. I'm not gonna lie. I got my bag of goodies here of stuff I want to talk about. So just I was debating doing this in the last few episodes, and I think intros are good because it'll give the listeners a little bit about everything that we're going to talk about today. So I just wanted to highlight that for the people out there, what we're going to be talking about. So if you guys aren't aware, the listeners aren't aware, Matt has over 40 years of martial arts experience in various modalities, from Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, combat Hapkido, boxing, wrestling, Muay Thai. He's a successful business owner of leading edge mixed martial arts. That's probably taken a long time to come into fruition, probably 20 plus years, probably since the first UFC and probably prior to that. So we're going to talk about those early days of what martial arts in the city look like pre-UFC, post-UFC, post-70s, I imagine, karate era, into how it evolved. I'm going to ask just like the straight out question later. I want to know what the best martial art is, what you think the best martial art is. I want to talk MMA, the inception of MMA in Ontario, the growth of it, fighters that you've coached. I want to talk about the city, self-defense, the growing difference in the city with safety and people's concern for safety. So I want to get into self-defense aspect of your martial arts knowledge, as well as how that pertains to women in the city as well, because I know coaching women and training women self-defense is a big part of your life right now, as well as just coaching in general. I know through my talking experience, through knowing you've affected, I would say, hundreds, if not even thousands of lives indirectly and directly through training people, whether that be in personal coaching or in coaching classes or in self-defense, or people who have passed on your knowledge, what you learned. So it's pretty amazing. A lot of people speak very highly of you and revere what you've done. So like I said, I'm a kid in a candy store. And where I want to know is, my first kind of thought where I'd ask you where I want this to go is, I've trained in the martial arts loosely in my growing up, my younger days, my teenage days. And then when I found Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, it was like, this is it. That was like my passion. It just like clicked. I was like, there's nothing I want to be doing more than Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So that's where I want to ask you, when did you start training? And when did it feel like you were like, wow, I love this? And what point was it? What modality, what martial art was it?
Yeah, wow. What? We're going way back. So I've always wanted to do martial arts when I was a kid. And there was nothing. I lived in Ignace and, watched movies and TV. And
I didn't know you lived in Ignace either.
Yeah, that's where I got started. So, I remember the Sears catalog coming out, because that's all we had, right? And seeing a karate suit and then wanting my mom, like, hey, man, order me this karate suit.
They had D's in the Sears catalog?
So she was like, that's kind of, what are you going to do with this thing, right? But... So finally, my dad was a miner and lived in Ignace. So this guy moved there from Montreal. His name was Roger Beaumier, and he was a black belt in karate. It was Shintani Wado Kai is what they call it now. And he started a martial arts school, and I was there. I started first day that I could. And
how old were you?
I was 13. 13 years old, so I'm gonna retire soon. From the city. I'm 55 now, and it's been nonstop. I've never stopped training. From that day forward, and always just a perpetual student. I never ever thought, it was never in my mind that I would be coaching or leading or anything like that. I just always wanted to learn, and that kind of led me to where I am today, kind of thing.
It's interesting. That's what I've noticed from you, and I find there's varying degrees of people in the martial arts. There's people who want to do it for fun. There's people who want to do it for self-defense. There's people who want to do it for a hobby. And that's what I noticed from you, is there's a level of people who do it, and they do it to learn it and learn it well and keep their mind open and keep learning constantly.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
so this is Ignace. You're 13 years old now. What were you watching that got you into that? Just martial arts movies, karate movies, Bruce Lee kind of stuff.
Yeah, anything, everything. You know, I don't know what it was, but I just wanted to train in it. And you know, and this my first instructor, Mr. Beaumier, he was you know, he was a hard ass. He was a hardcore dude. I just remember sparring. I loved to spar, but the way he did it was a little bit different. Like, we would go to tournaments and be open style, so you'd have like the hand pads and kick pads on. No, he didn't believe in that. Bare knuckle, no padding whatsoever. And
so you're sparring in the gym, in the dojo.
Yeah.
I guess they may have called it karate at that time. Was like no gloves,
no nothing. So it was a lot of minors. You know, I started with kids program right into the adult program. And so a lot of the guys were rough. It was rough and tumble. You know, it's hard contact, not to the head typically, but you get hit there, but the body definitely. And you know, so that was about the first 4 years. I did my first black belt was in Quebec, just myself and a group of black belts grading me, and it was like a 2.5 hour test. And you know, we did all this, everything you ever learned, and then got beat up a bunch, and then I passed my first black belt. So I was still in high school then, and then so Mr. Beaumier, he started you know, opening up other schools. He was in Dryden and Atikokan, and he'd travel around, and I would cover Ignace. And he moved up to Thunder Bay and started a club at it was first at EQ Jennings, and then he went into Lakehead University. And in 1984, I moved up here for university and joined in the club there. Till about 1986, and that's when he moved, 86, 87, and left me the club.
No way.
Yeah.
How many students at that time?
Not many. It was probably 20 to 30. It was small.
For an 18, you were 18, 19 at that time?
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine an 18-year-old, 19-year-old running a gym.
Actually, even before that, I was in Ignace, and he would come up once a month. And I was a high school student, and you know, there was a little bit bigger there. There was not a lot to do, so we had about 30, and then I'd run to Dryden and look after his club there. And so yeah, lots, you know, a lot being that young, looking after a lot of stuff. We at that time, he really wanted to kind of compete more in the national and provincial level, and you couldn't with that style. So he. When he asked the governing body, they're like, well, you got to be, you know, you're kind of there, but you got to be this Wado Ryu. So he's like, okay. And there was a doctor living in Sioux Lookout that was a Wado Ryu black belt, and would come up, and we, you know, would started training with him and changed everything over. And there was some really cool stuff there, just because the Wado Ryu is one of the 5 major Japanese styles, and once we hooked up with them, we were able to you know, compete provincially and nationally, and part of Karate Ontario. We'd get instruction from Toronto. They would come up. One of the instructors would come up once a year. But we also got these 2 really famous instructors that grew up in Japan, and one would come in the winter, one would come in the summer. And these guys were legendary martial artists. So called it the blood and guts era, you know, back in Japan, and they were really, really well known for their kumite, or their sparring. And the style was a style that came from Yoshin Shindo Jiu-Jitsu. So there was a lot of the stand-up things that we'd see in Jiu-Jitsu, especially the striking
Wado
style.
Kai, is that?
Wado Ryu.
Wado Ryu, yeah.
There's a little difference between the two of them. And so we learned some really intricate stuff. But back then, you know, sparring, forms, and 1-steps, that kind of stuff, a little bit of self-defense. So I did that till mostly at Lakehead University, and then over to Canadian Health and Fitness till 1996. And
how old are you now at 96?
So 96, I'm in my... I don't even know.
Well, 84 is when you said you came for school, right? And then you were 18, 19 at that point.
Yeah,
that still blows
19,
me away that you were running a gym with 30 people as a 19-year-old. Sure. I you know, teach a kids class at your gym, and I see how much work and prep and things you have to deal with. What was it feeling like? And you were in school as well at that time?
University, and then I started on City Bus in 1988 when I graduated university. Yeah, and I taught that style right up till 1996. I think a big change for me, I was always, always concerned about my students and why were they coming to me? And most of them it was fitness, self-defense, those two things. And I always questioned, was I giving them the best that I could? And I knew that it wasn't. There was better ways to get fit. There's better ways, definitely, for self-defense.
At that time, you knew that there was better ways for self-defense.
For
like
sure.
you're teaching karate, so that's what
Yeah.
I hope we can touch on maybe a little bit later. But like I tell people I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and they go, "Oh, you do karate?" My 17-year-old's a black belt. You know, are they? Yeah. You know, my father did karate, so it's. I think there's a big misunderstanding between, and that's where I hope we get to it. And later, if people keep listening till the end, and we're going to establish a difference between kind of like the early martial arts versus, let's say, I don't know, the functional ones. More so. So you're saying you want to give people the best, and you kind of were starting to feel like you weren't doing that somewhat.
Yeah, 100%. And 1993 comes along, right? You know what happened then, right? So we're martial arts back then. You get Black Belt magazine, and there was so many different kinds of martial arts. And at that time, it was like, how many martial arts does it take to screw in a light bulb? It's a joke, right? It was like, well, it takes 99, one to screw in the light bulb, and 98 to say how they would have done it better. Because it's typically the way it was. Everyone had the answer. 1993 comes along, the UFC comes along, and
you remember exactly where you were for
where
it?
I was and everything. Yeah.
Because we got it on a buddy's old, and it's like burned in my mind exactly where it was. But like you must have had to get satellite dish because it was pretty underground at that time.
It was on satellite at a sports bar, Canadian Health and Fitness had a little sports bar in the front, and this John Bodner he called it Bodsies. He was running it.
Okay.
And I was in there with my buddy Phil, who's running, still teaches with us.
Yeah.
And Phil was really knowledgeable, really knowledgeable guy, and some guys from work and friends. And we go in there, and this UFC thing, and I get these guys, they know nothing about the martial arts to come and watch, and it's packed. And we don't know what to expect. And we actually make a pool.
Yeah.
And so we have the sumo guy and kickboxer and Phil and I, Phil's right into martial arts, and he knows all about the Gracies, and they're really underground because they, if you didn't know, they were jiu-jitsu style in Brazil, straight up jiu-jitsu, but through Brazil being lots of opportunity to get in fights, whether you want to or not. So they got to use it a lot, and they found, okay, this works, this doesn't work. Let's keep experimenting with this. So they put an ad in the paper that says, "Hey, you're a tough guy. Come on down to our gym. We'll break your arm for you."
Is this in Torrance?
This is in Rio. No, this is in Rio de Janeiro. And this is how they kind of developed it. So imagine in a place where you don't do challenges like that. Well, they had guys lined up out the door, and they would practice their martial art on karate people, boxers, anything. And what they found is nobody knew how to fight on the ground. So they kind of took out what didn't work and found ways to make things work, and that's kind of how the style evolved. Then they moved to California, and they were doing that in this garage, and just slowly building a reputation. Art Davies being one of them, and this idea came. Well, let's do this on pay-per-view, and so I knew the story. Phil was right into it, and so we took the little Brazilian guy in this pool. Most people in the bar, was funny, took a kickboxer or they took the sumo guy. Sumo guy being 400 pounds, right? And then the fight starts, and we don't know what to expect. And that first fight, I don't know if you remember it.
You got the kick to the face.
Yeah.
Yes.
So boom, just sidestep punch on his knees, boot to the face, tooth goes out, hits the camera, and the bar went like that.
It's real. It was
silent.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting, and it was mind blowing, right?
Yes.
So we watched that, a couple of them, and man, I want to learn that, and I ask...
By that, you're talking about the jiu-jitsu at this point?
Jiu-jitsu.
So that's where I think people don't understand, and with so at this time there was six or seven main modalities of martial arts in there. There was the kickboxers, there was some shoot fighters, there was some karate people, and then there was this little skinny Brazilian Jiu Jitsu guy. What would you say Hoist was at the time? 175 pounds.
And
so
he looked like a kid.
Yes.
You know, they could have put his brother Hickson in, who went to a tournament in Japan, and they made that really famous video choke documentary, and that was like I had the video, the VHS of it, and wore that thing out. I mean, but he looked the part. Like, he was, you know, a mean looking dude, right? And Hoist looked like a kid, and not super experienced. And it was a brilliant idea. Let's put this kid in there, and you know, he beat everyone, right? And for me, it was like, oh, I got to learn that.
Yes.
You know? So, you know, I remember asking one of these really famous instructors that what do you do with a guy like that, you know? And he's like, you don't fight him. And I'm like, no, that's not the answer. Not that I want to fight him, but I want to learn that. This little guy made these people look stupid, you know? And that started. So we was still teaching karate, and Phil and I were, you know, starting to investigate that. We bought these first, the only way you could get information back then. There was, I don't even know, maybe there was a black belt in Canada, I don't know. But we just got this VHS tape set. It was about $400, and on today's standards, not very good. But we just, you know, got together and we practiced and we worked at it and we beat the hell out of each other, and it just evolved from there.
So I want to rewind it there, because I want to try to get you to do it your best to explain it to like kind of the layman's, because it was such a weird juxtaposition. I found that first UFC, because the first fight was like this opener, this sumo guy getting kicked in the face by a kickboxer and his tooth flying at his face, and we're like, wow, this is like, feels like Mortal Kombat. Like, that was the time of the day, you know, 93, 94, and those video games were coming out. We were kids watching this, like, we thought like the police were going to come in and raid this event, like midway. We thought we were doing something on the ground. But maybe break it down for the layman. Hoist Gracie, this little skinny guy in a gi, he decimated all these striking artists with no punches or kicks, barely. He a couple maybe kicks to set up takedowns, but how did he defeat everyone with what is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in that sense? So
they had figured out through you know, one-on-one combat that most people have no idea what to do on the ground. So there was a boxer in that he put a glove on one hand. I think he put it on his left hand. His idea was, I'm going to jab and, you know, hit this guy and then knock him out with my other hand. I don't care if I break it. So, you know, they're used to this. So they kind of put their hands up, put their chin up. Hey, come and punch me. They'd use their kick to kind of keep them away. And as soon as that punch came in, they just ducked under and got the clinch. And as soon as they got on that body and then clinched, it was going in the ground. And then, you know, it's like here you got this sprinter, let's say, and you throw him in the middle of a pool. He can sprint, he'll kick your buddy, but in the middle of a pool, if he's never swam a day in his life, it's over. And that's what these guys were. As strong as they were and as good at their sport as they were, they had no idea what to do.
They'd never been there before, ever. Never felt that leverage or that technique or anything like that, huh?
No, not at all. And they just, you know, once that clinch happened, it was over. And it's pretty hard. It's why even today when we watch MMA, you know, those wrestlers, the ground guys have such an advantage, because it's hard to stop that clinch for a long time. You know, and then the whole sport's evolved over and over and over again. He made it look easy. No time limits. You know, it was to me it was mind blowing. You know,
I remember that feeling too. I remember that feeling of being perplexed, of being like, who is this? He was a host for us. Me and my friends being in grade, I think 4 or 5 at the time. It was like, he's a household name now. This Hoist Gracie is like the anaconda of the ground, who's just beating everyone. And it just was something so unprecedented. So Yeah, 100%. And just the look of him too, right? I think the average person could identify with that, because, you know, it wasn't a lot of muscle. He was just this lanky kind of kid, and, you know, and what he did was amazing. So you and Phil now are perplexed by this, and now you want it. You want it in the arsenal.
We're practicing. We do it even in my karate school, you know, we'd practice and do some stuff afterwards and that. And then, so by 1996, I'm done with karate. My students, I'm always asking, what do you guys want? They want self-defense. Steven Seagal's out there doing this cool Aikido stuff, and I love Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and so I took this opportunity. My wife had graduated university. I said, "That's your first year. You're a teacher. Let's travel." I had a university degree, so we looked around, and we ended up taking some time, renting out our house, and going to South Korea, and doing teaching. Both of us did a full year of teaching, and I found a martial art there. There's Taekwondo everywhere, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something a little bit different.
To interrupt you, did you go to Korea with the intention of looking for a martial art? Or
100%.
We were
going there we got the jobs ahead of time, and so they'd fly us over, and they'd have our plane ticket back, plus an apartment, and we both had work for a full year.
Nice.
We actually went the end of 96, so it was fall of 96 and all of 97, or most of 97. And then once I got there, I got to know some of the teachers. They had Korean teachers in the school as well where we were teaching. And I asked one of the girls, I said, can you help me find a Hapkido school? She just got out a phone book and went through it, found the closest one, and brought me there and introduced me to the instructor. He spoke no English whatsoever. And the guy taught classes from 4:30 to last class started at 9:30 at night. You could stay as many as you want, and it was 6 days a week. And I'm like, I'm home. And I started training there in Hapkido, and he also did Thai boxing. There was my instructor and he had two really close friends. And we would train on Saturdays at one of their schools, either our school or one of their schools, and they also did Thai boxing, so I got to do some of that.
Nice.
And it was a great experience. Barely anyone in there spoke a word of English. I had once in a while a university student or something would come and take me under his wing, and we'd talk, and he'd explain stuff. You learn by doing. But I had about 18 years I had 2 black belts at the time when I went, so I had a pretty good understanding of martial arts, and great experience. I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. It was,
So for the common listener, probably Hapkido wasn't the style that you saw in the UFC. It wasn't Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. It's a different style, and to me, it's when I feel you do it on me, or I felt people do Hapkido on me, it hurts. It's joint locks, but from standing, kind of. How would you describe it in your own words?
Well, it came from a martial art called Daito Aki Jiu-Jitsu, and it was a lot of attacking the joints, so fingers and wrists and elbows and shoulders and the knees and things like that. Because it's a Korean martial art, lots of kicking as well. All Korean martial arts seem to be very gifted at kicking, and it was for self-defense. So people grab you, and then you manipulate their joint in some way to pain compliance or a throw. It had the same lineage as Aikido, which is people know from Steven Seagal. The difference is more in attitude, where Japan at the end of the war, after Hiroshima and the bombing, the man who created Yoshiba, who created Aikido, was looking more for something to unite the world. So the idea being, if I come to grab you, you would throw me on the ground, not really break my joint, hurt me, keep throwing me till I learn my way and stop. Where the Koreans, of course, just went through, the Japanese had invaded and stayed there till the end of the war, and they were looking for more, an aggressive, and we're not going to let this happen again, that kind of thing. So a lot of the special forces and the bodyguards of the presidents and things like that use Hapkido as their main tool for training. So it was learned a lot from it. It was very interesting. Living in Korea itself had its own, it was such a foreign country. I was going to
say, that's a big culture difference. I actually had the chance I lived in a Korean temple, Buddhist temple at one point in my life, and it was drastically different. Yeah, the way we had children in the temple, and the way they child reared, it was just like night and day. North American most North American kids wouldn't last a week in that environment. Would be 100%. Calling police or whatever. And that's what I'd be curious to ask about the martial art. Was it where I was alluding to with the temple is that they were disciplinary. Yeah. And was that, did you see that in the Hapkido when you took it?
You know, if the kid did something wrong, you know, they'd be doing push-ups with almost like a V push-up, and the instructor would have the shinai.
That's exactly Kendall, what these
and
did.
And that butt come up and we wow! Yeah. So, but you know, technically they're still at war, right? North and South. They were technically still at war. So training was hard. Training was tough, and they took it serious. You know, every male was in the military. Mm-hmm. If the alarm went off, they had a place to go, or whatever they were. You know, wherever they had to go. They all had to do 2.5 years of military service. Mm-hmm. So
they still do to this day. I'm pretty sure,
it's still the same. You know, and there was a few incidents when we first got there. We didn't know what the hell was going on. Is this the way it's going to be? But what had happened is a North Korean sub had crashed in the South waters, and they went ashore, and there was about a crew of 90 with 15 commandos. Well, the commandos killed the crew, the North Korean crew, and because they didn't want them to be captured, and just started hiking for the north through the south. So the whole South Korean army was out on patrol when we got there, you know, and there was this military everywhere, and we're like, holy crap, is this what it's like here? Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's a few incidents like that where we didn't know what was going on. Sirens were going off, you know, you felt the reality of what they live with every day. Mm-hmm. You know, you go to the DMZ in Seoul, the demilitarized zone, and you're looking across, and you got these little things in binoculars, and you can see the North Koreans looking back at you, you know, and they have spent a lot of money, like 25% of their gross national product on their military at the time, and it was all facing Seoul, you know. So it was, it was different. They also were very, you know, been invaded a lot, so they're very protectionist, and there wasn't a lot of English signs. Mm-hmm. We traveled a lot when we were there, in Hong Kong and Japan and Thailand and things like that, and we felt it easy to get around. Lots of things in English, you know, the most common language, international language. Korea wasn't like that, so you know, every day just taking a cab somewhere or getting a haircut was trying to communicate was challenging, you know, but. You know, makes us stronger. My wife and I together, I think it was really good bonding experience for us.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I've heard that. You were married at that point, right?
Yeah.
I've heard that. My parents, they said they marriage counseled. Well, they did a long time ago through the church, and they said that was like advice for couples often was, as soon as when you get married, leave for a year. Like, you know what I mean? Because you set your own, you establish your own routines, your own, you know, your own traditions and stuff. You know, the families can often pull people in directions. Kids come into play real quick.
Yeah.
So after what was it that made you leave there after 2 years? Like, was it just time to go? Was it?
Well, we I had my job waiting, so I, you know, went back to that. My wife had enough too. It was a go life. It was just enough. So we came back, and. You know, I right away, my old students like, hey, come on, what are you doing? Let's, you know, you want to train? And I just started training with them privately, quietly, and they loved what we were doing. I found the style of Hapkido that I did was maybe all the kicking and things like that, maybe not the greatest for the North Americans. So I kind of studied a few of the different styles, and I chose to, you know, teach that was called combat Hapkido at the time, a little more North American and very self-defense based. So, you know, I started with that, and then I believe it was 98. I opened up on May Street. We got a little school there, and
so when you came back, you still had students ready and kind of lined up, good to go.
You know, Phil was still around. He was doing some MMA at the time while I was gone, and I believe he did some of these smoker shows back, you know.
What are smoker shows?
They're just like in bars and stuff like that.
Like you go into a bar and fight someone.
Yeah, they've got shows on, God. And this guy's like, hey, you want to fight? Yeah, fight this guy.
No way.
Yeah, and it was just getting going. Like it was.
So this is 90. What now that you're back?
You know, 90. 8.
Okay, so the UFC's been out for 5 years.
Yeah,
it's been
really
kinda,
underground then.
Yeah, still probably not televised too much or anything of that sort. So you come back and now it's you, Phil, and you said that's where May Street was.
Yeah, and that,
incepted?
I advertised like combat Hapkido, and man, it just took off like crazy. And, I kind of did my thing, right? So there was the joint locks and that of combat Hapkido. I loved the striking, and it would be kind of, like pad work and things like that, basics. And we started to do some ground grappling. And that was all kind of, people weren't ready then for, training in t-shirts and shorts and no belts. That just didn't happen. That was not going on at that time. There was no MMA. There wasn't the word MMA, but we were doing it. So we kind of had 3 aspects to it. So it was, and then we had guys that kind of really wanted to do more of, let's start sparring and add in wrestling and that. So we started just on the weekend, a Saturday, come in and do, basically it was MMA. And we called it Kick and Shoot, the Kick and Shoot Club, And so Ryan Landgraf started at that time from LU with wrestling, and kind of introduced some wrestling. And that's how we evolved. So we were at May Street for a couple of years. We went over to need a bigger spot, and we went in with the Thunder Bay Judo Club in 2001.
So following the Kingsman Center, or not the Kingsman, sorry, May Street, how many students you talking looking at now?
Oh man, 80.
80 students?
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah, we had, so I started a combat Hapkido class, an hour and a half, and it was just, there's no room. So then I'd teach and then teach another one right after. Yes. So we needed a little more space, and that's when we went over to the Kinsman Center, and we were there a good 10 years, at the Kinsman Center. So 2001.
That's when you went to the Kinsman Center? Now, for people, I'm just curious what it must have felt like for the people. Like, Ryan Landgraf is a pretty talented wrestler. Yeah. So what was it like for the people, and if people don't know him, he's a rather strong individual. What was it like for the people going up against a wrestler who have no wrestling? Like, was there a weird dichotomy of people no skill versus skill? And like, how did that balance out?
You know what? We just trained in, he would teach what he was doing. So he would teach some takedowns, but he was learning striking. So he was learning some stand-up stuff, and it was good. We had it, sometimes people would come in and always had that. They'd push the limits a little bit and try some stupid stuff. But, it just kind of went like that. Once we got in the Kinsman Center, we started to separate things a little over the years, then combat Hapkido became our self-defense program. Started to teach a straight up Brazilian Jiu Jitsu program. And then our striking was more, it turned into just MMA. So we had MMA, we had the self-defense as combat Hapkido, we had Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And then they had, with self-defense as well, they started adding some stick and knife defense and things like that. And so those years were really about developing the skill and the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and MMA. And we were doing that right through till our first MMA, pro MMA match was 2007, like January of 2007.
Wow, so you had a full 6-7 years of training and all the modalities.
Yeah, we were way ahead of the curve. I remember back then there was like the Canadian Underground was, MMA, and people get on there, mostly Ontario people talking about MMA, and somebody brought up, who are the first, clubs in MMA in Ontario, Canada, and it was Carlos Newton. Do you know who that is?
I've heard the name.
So he was early in Canada, the big MMA guy. Went to Pride, and he actually won the UFC belt, and lost it to, I think, Pat Miletich, I think was the one that beat him. Okay. And so he had a club. There was
where was his club based out of?
Southern Ontario. Yeah, and there was a couple others. Jeff Joslin's club was around a long time, so he fought in the UFC as well. And Combat Arts, Danny was really early, our jiu-jitsu coach. And, and this big thing came up, and they're like, I don't know who it was, but somebody from down there's like, man, these guys in Thunder Bay, they've been doing MMA so long. It was way before the words even came out. Like MMA, the phrase MMA was coined long after we were already doing that. So we've been at it a long haul, Our first pro match. It's on Sherdog and stuff like that, because there was stuff before that, but was Matt Veal in Wisconsin, and so that was crazy. Lots of people went down, and he won his match in the second round.
You were head coach then?
Yeah.
What was the feelings like? Tell me what it was like.
It was nuts, because we go in there and we don't know what to expect. The guy that's running it's a promoter. There is no commission. So a commission is an athletic commission, like a boxing commission, typically looks after the fighters. They weigh them in, make sure that the fights are even. Well, there's none of that.
It's essentially a governing body for safety purposes, making sure people are getting their doctors.
For sure.
Like all that kind of stuff in line.
There was none of that.
Nothing.
So it's just you want to fight, and the promoter, he's just worried about making money.
Yes.
Right? So, yeah, there's mismatches, weight-wise, all that kind of stuff. You have a guy who's never fought before. He's a street fighter against some guy who's training. You have, somebody pulls out, doesn't show up, so the promoter has a guy fight twice. He fights first match, he fights the 8th match.
Jeez.
So in the first one, this guy, on his record, he got armbarred on his right arm and tapped, and then like 5 fights later he lost by armbar again on the same arm, and I mean, we were watching this, and some of the characters, it was crazy. Like, they're just, people that just, all kinds, well-trained, jacked guys, that look like they should be in the UFC, to guys who are just looking for trying to get respect somehow, right?
Gotcha.
Like, just, hey, this will do it, right? I'm just going to go in there and I'm telling my friends I'm an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was pretty wild. And,
were you nervous for your fighters at that point?
Oh, God, yeah. Always. I was pretty confident with Matty that one. He won it. Yeah, the place went nuts. And then everyone wanted to fight after that, right? So we went down a few times, that same place, and just crazy stories, crazy after parties. I think Nathan Gunn, of course, he's well known in Thunder Bay. He had his first 2 fights. First fight, he gets this bouncer guy, big, way bigger than him.
Yeah.
Just comes running at him for a takedown, and the promoter, because he's kind of a sociopath, he allows knees to the head on the ground, which knees to the head on the ground is super dangerous. Sure. Pride used to do it, Pride rules in Japan, super dangerous. Well, Nathan, sprawls on this guy, so he's on top, and he's got his head in his belly, and he's dropping knees like from the ceiling, pretty much. And he hits this guy in the head about 12 times, and finally the guy goes limp, and you see him in the back, and these welts are just kind of starting to pile out of his head. Stuff like that, and then Nathan, his next fight after that, I believe, was probably the worst injury I've personally seen in a cage. He had just had surgery for his nose. He had a deviated septum.
This is Nathan?
Yeah, Nathan. Yes. And he's fighting a guy, and there's all this buzz in this place. There's all these people there to watch this guy. He's some really well-known street fighter from Minneapolis. And so they go at her, and this guy just comes flying across the cage, just like fast and quick punches, and he catches Nathan in the nose, and Nathan just like sees red. Nose explodes. Oh man. And they end up this big exchange, and they fall on the ground, and Nathan gets mount on this guy, and the refs were not trained. They were just friends of the promoter. Jeez. So Nathan lands this, and he's like, Nathan's tough. He's just made of iron, and he hits this guy with an elbow in the mouth, and the guy's mouth guard spit out, and Nathan hits him with this massive elbow. The guy was probably already unconscious. The ref doesn't know it, and blood starts to squirt, like as if you were laying on the ground, and a kid had a little squirt gun, and he was squirting this. Every time the guy's heart would beat about 4 feet in the air. Yeah. So the place goes nuts, and then it's just silent, and it's just, Yeah, it was crazy.
Jeez, heart's kind of sinking.
Yeah,
because obviously you don't want to be a part of that kind of situation too.
Exactly,
right?
and this guy's girlfriend's sitting behind me, and I'm cornering, and she's gone in shock.
Oh, no.
So I'm trying to help her out and take care of Nathan and hope this guy's not dead. The guy was okay, he just needed a lot of stitches, but it was really scary. Probably the worst injury I've seen, and seen broken legs and things like that.
Pretty brutal at that time.
Yeah, it was, just because nobody's looking out for these guys at that time, right? The fighters. Though this guy was obviously been in a lot of street fights. Once they hit the ground, he had no idea what was going on. So, but he was okay. He did end up fighting again at some point after that. And that's the way it went. And then we got to our first commission show. We were in Wisconsin at that time. Minnesota got commissioned first, and we did our first commission show at them, and it was really strict. It was a former boxer that was running it, old guy, fought Muhammad Ali.
No way.
Hated MMA, thought it was a bunch of disrespectful punks. So it was super strict. And but I was glad, right? I was happy. You had weigh-ins, you had people looking out for you. So we did that, and then on to our first Canadian fight was in Calgary, and that was Nathan Gunn and Matt Beal went out to some shows out there, and they really made some name for themselves, and fought in some really big shows out there, and then always lots of guys joining, and Dave Letourneau was did really well. Andrew Elliott was a really big name in MMA. He was an LU wrestler. He fought 4 or 5 fights for us, and easily would have been a UFC star, but he got concussed here in town, like some concussion issues. So he ended up moving to Adrenaline in London, and they call him the mad scientist there, and he's responsible for their last 2 UFC guys that have gotten into the UFC. They basically credit to him just because he really is a mastermind. Great striking, great wrestling. We had a lot of guys like that over the years come in and out.
Do you find, man, and that's a curious question, and maybe a different vein away from the MMA, is I find you said before the wrestlers make the best transitions, and in that proverbial question, what is the best modality? And people argue this, people online, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or wrestling, it kind of sways back and forth that. But I even wonder with Muay Thai, like, you have children yourself, and I think I've asked that question a long time ago, and I'm kind of curious to hear your answer again. Out of all the martial arts, it seems like, I could be wrong, it seems like you steered them towards wrestling, and why?
I did, for sure. A couple of reasons. One, I don't know what they wanted to do, right? If they wanted to do MMA, they were young when they started wrestling, and they did love MMA. So if they were going to do MMA, having a base in wrestling was really important. We could see that for a bunch of reasons. One, the ability to take it to the ground anytime they wanted, the work ethic, and you got to be in shape.
People don't see that. That's why people can't even imagine that when you go to a wrestling practice. It is repetition after repetition after repetition, and that's not like we talked the difference between karate and mixed martial arts, and wrestling's one small facet of mixed martial arts, and I don't think people see or understand how much goes into a wrestling practice. You want a disciplined, tough, well-routine kid, put him in wrestling because it's gonna grind them and build them back up. Yeah,
100%. Plus, the problem up here is always competition. You don't want somebody to go, and I had fighters never competed before and went into a pro MMA. So think about walking down that walk, lights on, door shuts, click. Are you ready? I don't know.
Yes.
Because they've never competed in anything before. You live up in Thunder Bay, and if you've never wrestled or did, so I always wanted them to compete as much as they can. And man, in wrestling, they're the club. They go to tournaments from little kids, right? And the club and the Garvey and those ones in town, and then you hit high school and you're wrestling all the time. So you're getting that experience in front of people and competing. 2-minute matches, 3-minute matches, and there's a chance to go to school. Like my youngest now is in university, So it was a chance to wrestle,
Hey, you're saying that I guess there's opportunity for it, right? If you can get scholarships in wrestling.
Kind of for sure. Wrestle for your country. He's wrestled in every tournament that our country has. Medaled in everyone from nationals to Canada Games, Ontario Games. So now, for him, his goal is to wrestle at some point for Canada and something, Pan Am's or something like that. But it's we hadn't done MMA at our gym for a little bit, and then to go back to coaching it, and I remember Josh and I were like, holy crap, that wrestling up on the cage, and
yes,
it's grueling. It's the hardest part of the MMA is just, there's no rest. The body on top of you just grinding, and then it's tough. That's kind of why I kind of steered them that direction, my older son Devin, he was always a really good striker, and he wrestled right through, did really well in high school, medaled at OFSA and everything, and he's just like, no man, I want to box, and that's where he's at right now. And that's a tough sport. It's too. Tough. Boxing's tough.
What I wonder about the wrestling though, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, and I find it's like this with all martial arts, and you use the analogy of swimming and drowning before, but when you train at that level of intensity with your hands on someone day in, day out, it kind of turns the volume down a little bit. Like I remember that they say that in Fight Club, after you fight 2 or 3 times, the volume on everything kind of seems turned down a little bit. And that's what I think most people don't see about fighting is you're kind of comfortable and relaxed, as weird, and maybe not fully relaxed, but more aware than the average person in that heightened situation. So for sure. I just wonder if that intensity of wrestling is maybe helpful towards that mentality of learning in the moment almost.
Yeah, 100%. And you do it every day, right? It's every day. And of course, like my son will tell you, he loves wrestling really skilled guys. Like better rather than some grinder, he loves that, even though he's going to get his butt kicked. He loves that. It's just that challenge and just how smooth and slick things are. Even if you're getting, you're losing, he just loves working with, whether it's in competition or whatever. And I think it's that pace that it goes at, and it's the mind game. It's more of a mental game, rather than just brute force. And there's a lot to it that way.
Did you find putting your kids in well, I don't know if you classify wrestling as a martial art, well, I don't know what the technical term is, a sport, but did you find that impacted them for their focus, for their behavior, anything in that regards?
Yeah, for sure. I think, to be successful at it, you have to work. You have to work really, really hard. And it's not a sexy sport, right? They're in this sport where, their friends will come and watch them, annihilate people here in town, and they're like, yeah, that's cool, but it isn't football. Football's cool for these kids in high school.
Yes.
The girls are like, whoa, and they're not out there typically for even the basketball and all that, but not
the wrestling's in the stinky dungeon room that's padded, and
you're wearing this little singlet thing. And they do it because they love it, and and it just makes them tough, But those are the skills, and what I love about combat sports, whether it's wrestling or boxing or all that, is that you have to be in the moment. One,
yes, that's what I was alluding to.
You have to be in the moment. If you're not in the moment, you get your ass kicked. That's just the way it is. You lose focus, you get your ass kicked. And you come out face to face with your ego every single time you spar, wrestle a match, just train with a partner. He hits you too hard or he does something, you gotta let it go, right? You can't, or you lose, you gotta let it go. What did I learn from this? And what I found in the traditional martial arts was that didn't happen. A lot of times, there's no touch. We're controlling our techniques and things like that. And when I would sit down, I remember going to Toronto one time, and there was a big competition, and sitting and listening to black belts and stuff like that. I didn't know anybody. I just went up there to compete. And I come back and I just thought, these are some of the most arrogant people I've ever met in my life.
Really?
They talk about honor and all these, traditional things, but then you hear them talking about this guy and this guy and this guy, and there wasn't a lot of respect Partly because they weren't getting their butts kicked. Even when you lost, it was very arbitrary. It was a point given, oh, he wasn't close enough in that technique. In combat sports, you're off on it. You have a day off. You get beat up. You get hurt. You lose a match. It's obvious you've lost, right? And you come face to face with that ego, and I really liked that. I found that there was a lot more respect given. Just because people work hard, because their determination and that kind of stuff. It was real. The first time I went to a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu seminar with a really high level guy was John Machado, so cousins of the Gracies. I just love the attitude coming from where a master, you call everybody master and that kind of stuff too. Hey man, hey my friend, and then give you knuckles, and then he beats the living hell out of you, and then he gives you a hug. And first time you meet him, he's hugging you. You come to my place. You come and visit, Rio, and I just thought, man, this is the way it is. This guy is. He sat, and there was 30 people in that seminar, and he sat in the middle and beat us all up one at a time. 30 people in a row, just did whatever he wanted with us, and there was no ego whatsoever. He hugged you. He was just the friendliest guy, and I said, yeah, that's martial arts right there. We had a ton of respect for him, and he respected us the same, and I just love that. I love combat sports. I see that all the time. Guys go in there, they go to war, and they're best friends after for life.
Yes.
I see it all the time. And because they respect each other.
That's the hard part. That's what you were talking about the MMA before, and it was a very brutal sport at one time. I think much better now. I think there's a big misconception that people see it as very brutal, and when it's not. It's very controlled and very calculated. But that's what's missed out hugely. I feel like people often think I want to put my kid in a martial art because it's discipline and all that, but holy moly, when you put in a real contact sport, like what you learn for your being and your ego and really losing, not just losing, like you said, in a match of some point game system, but being slammed down and maybe your breath going knocked out of your wind, and people are watching you and you're embarrassed, and it's very humbling, and that learning, I alluded to my stepdaughter was just in a tournament and she got creamed. And you said, and it was the same thing I told her right after, and she wasn't ready to hear it right after, but it's what you said to me. You were like, good. I'm glad. That's great. That's awesome. That's the best learning you could ask for.
Yeah.
You go somewhere and you win and you do great. You don't learn from You learn from winning, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But losing is the way better teacher than winning is, right?
Yeah. Anybody who's been in it, a while will tell you that, that's when they... my son went to a boxing tournament, and... out of 13 people there, he was probably second best. Skill-wise, he was number one. He didn't have the experience, So he comes up against a guy, he's pros in his corner and trains with a national team guy, and he loses a decision. Best thing that could ever happen to him. If he'd have won that match, how hard would he have to have worked? In a big tournament, biggest tournament Canada's ever had. How hard would he work after that? He's a hard worker, but... when he came back, it was, I need to do this. Had it all down. I didn't have to coach him on it. And just changing everything. Because it's a learning experience, right? It's the first time for him to go to a tournament. And I couldn't ask for more, And a lot of times that's what we need. It gives us focus. What do we need to work on? And we see it in the gym. You can see sometimes with little matches, and kids get so upset, they get mounted, whatever, and they get so upset. And it's like, let's have it happen here. And this is very safe. And in our gym, you get taken down, whatever it may be, rather than out there, in a tournament or whatever. And that's why, I always used to say that with my guys when we were training MMA and stuff is, let's have you get mounted here and somebody punching you here, and let's deal with it here, because it'll never happen out there in the cage or anywhere else. So, and we don't think about that. We just think about winning, especially this generation. This generation, it's just...
Well, speaking of this generation, that's what I've been talking to people a lot about with the success of kids Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and it's just that hands-on with other kids. Like, I work in a school, and rightfully so, with the era we're in right now, there's no contact. And so kids aren't learning that appropriate play, like whereas we wrestled before we played combat. I remember playing tackle football with no equipment, like full on your head bouncing off the ground, you know what I mean? Teachers never broke it up. Kids aren't learning that now. Siblings are also greatly reduced. Like I grew up in a family of 6. Kids have generally 1 or 2 now in a family, so they're not getting beat up by siblings. So I just see even more of a need for jiu-jitsu and combat arts in kids' lives. Like they just take to it like white on rice. Like it's nuts how they love it.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. What I've seen, your program isn't even a year old, you know, and I walk in there and man, the skill level and these kids just can't get enough of it. You know, especially seeing those little girls go in there and just and on this, you know, on another kid's back or mount and I mean, you could have 20 classes like that, you know, and it's just, it's wonderful to see. Everything is very useful. It's very, you know, a lot of times in martial arts, it's hard. We don't even know where some of this stuff came from, right? One steps and you have, there's no aliveness to it. Everything about what you do in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is realistic. It's body on body, similar to wrestling, you know. Yeah, it's super cool.
So with that being said, you raised your children in wrestling. My stepdaughter's in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and even segueing to talking about girls, because I love coaching girls because they don't have that thing that boys are just distractible, right? They look around. Yeah. Girls listen and they use the technique, right? Yeah, and the technique, sure. I love Conor McGregor saying, you know, I'm gonna botch it now that I'm put on the spot, but it's precision beats power. Or do you know that one? Speed, timing beats speed, right? Yeah. So it's technique based. And I botched that right hard, but it's essentially, and the girls learn the technique. But in all these, there's you know, so many things. There's wrestling, there's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's Muay Thai. This is the proverbial question: is what would be the best to learn if you really were out there in the street and someone starts attacking you? What would you want under your belt? What would you?
So you know, people ask, right? What's the best martial art? So, there isn't the answer is what are your goals? There's a best martial art for you. It might be a different one for someone else. So you always got to start with what are your goals? So if your goals are self-defense, there's probably a better way to train. I don't think there's a best martial art, but there is a better way to train, and that's 100%. My own experience, I love the combat sports because everything you do for real. So
combat sports, you're talking about striking?
Just wrestling's a combat sport. Okay. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a combat sport. Boxing, Muay Thai. What we're doing for real with aliveness. So every time you get in the gym, your kids are taking each other down. They're dominating position, mount, up against a wall. Ground. Imagine if they get into a tussle with someone who's never trained before, how easy that'll be for them because they do it all the time. Same with the wrestler, getting with somebody that has never stopped a takedown, doesn't know how to do it, you know, bang. It's easy for them. A boxer, because they do it every day. What I found with, you know, when I studied karate, not to put karate down, there's some styles of karate or just gyms where there was Fred Simonitis in town. He's an old guy. And man, they used to beat the hell out of each other. And they were tough guys, but that's back in the day. When I studied it, my thought was, you know, now that I teach boxing, especially when we hit every single time we're in the gym, right? We're training on each other. We're hitting the bag, and you punch like a foot through the target. That's where you're focusing. When I trained in martial arts, in karate specifically, I trained to miss. And I missed for 20 years, right?
What do you mean by your training?
So if we're sparring, here's a point, is here.
Oh, because you can't make full contact with the face.
Can't make any contact. Or the body, anything, right? It used to be don't touch. Now rules have changed and there's some light contact. Even that light contact, I had so many people come in and try to make the transition. I'm like, no, I need you to, where's the power? Come on, hit. Yeah. And they can't because they've trained 10, 15 years to pull. So it's really so now you get into a situation where you have to defend yourself. This guy is trained in beating the crap out of people on the street, and you've trained for 10 years on how to miss someone.
Yes.
Because that's the honest answer.
Give a guy with a rough life, or a kid who had a rough childhood and got beat up in the streets a few times, he's going to beat someone who has 12 years of karate, hands down.
Well,
not hands down,
everything,
but,
everything is
relative, right?
comes down to those two people, and I've seen some and karate is like fruit. There's bananas, there's oranges. Like George St. Pierre was a Kyoshinkai black belt. That's a tough martial art. It's karate. It's tough. It's full contact. You don't punch to the face, but everything else is full contact. Head. Those guys are some of the toughest people going, right? They make really good transition into MMA, into kickboxing and stuff like that. So, using that term, I guess karate is not, but that's just my experience with what I did. So I can't speak for everyone, but yeah, I trained to miss for years and years and years, so, yeah, for me, the combat sports, if your goal is street self-defense, I need it for my job, and that's what I'm getting a lot of that right now, calls for people that need it in their work. The grappling arts is what I have to teach, because you can't punch somebody in the face, elbow them in the face and keep your job if you're a paramedic or a police officer or something like that. It's nice to have those skills.
Yes.
You get jumped by 3 people or something. Hey, it's great to have a knockout punch.
Elbows probably work good in close range in a bar, right? But you can't do that in a work environment, right?
So especially being able to do stand-up grappling, taking the back, and keeping yourself safe is what I would teach. Somebody going to a war zone, going to South Africa, I know the group that trains there, and there's a specific way that I would teach them, and it would be extremely violent because they're going into a very violent situation.
Oh, interesting.
So it all depends on what are your goals, what are your needs, and I get that almost every day. Somebody coming up, and a lot of times, like what people are finding out today, and some of the work that I'm getting today is that combat sports, getting people boxing and getting in better shape. I've got people using it for addictions. So they are, they don't want to use, they're getting out there and they're hitting the bag, they're doing one-on-one with me, and it just keeps them, it's that edge. Takes that edge. They're done hitting and they're just like, oh. So they're coming to do that. There's people that are having anxiety issues with mental illness.
Yeah, there's a lot of PTSD studies now are coming out with martial arts.
Coming out and doing come on in one-on-one and we do some boxing, get them on the bag and get them, doing some striking and stuff. We have people coming into a class like that. People with rough lives. We've had, people that have been in some of the gangs and have come out and really, maybe the first class they were thinking, I want to learn some of this to hurt somebody. But within 2 weeks, they're out of the gang and they just want to learn, they want to learn the art. So it's interesting. Best martial art for you. What are your goals and what do you want? And there's definitely a best way to train those.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. I honestly didn't look at it that way. I always thought maybe Muay Thai, because it's you're grabbing people, you're clinching. For people who don't know what Muay Thai is, it's kickboxing with elbows and knees and a clinch.
8 limbs.
Eight limbs,
hands,
right? Elbows,
knees, and kicks. Deadly martial art. There's a lot of times what about kid in the school ground, right? He's done. He's getting expelled. He goes and
good point.
Pulls on, clinches somebody, knees him in the face. Where, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, what I love about it and what you do with those kids is if they have to use that, it's always because they're in trouble. It's not, you're not teaching people to punch in the face or anything like that. It's like they've been knocked to the ground, somebody's sitting on their chest, they can deal with that, no problem. Even that close to close push, shoving you, whatever, hands up, and they're not going to hurt anybody. They can take them down, they can sit on them, enough, choke them if they have to, but for the most part, if all you know how to do is this, when push comes to shove, you're going to do that. And sometimes that's necessary. But, most fights are started when I do teach self-defense, street self-defense, it's very, I'd say 10 to 15% of it's physical.
Well, that's where I was going to go into next. So you have a big role in teaching self-defense, and maybe before we get into self-defense, because I'm curious to ask you, and I'm really curious about this question. I think Jeremy, just out of curiosity, is his mic good? Is it close enough? You think it's getting good sound on there?
Yeah.
And another really curious question. and I don't mind pausing just for a second. Do these shake on the table when it's going? Like, do you see that?
Yeah.
You do see the shake, eh?
Anytime you touch the table.
I thought so. It's not a big deal. I can put them on the ground or even on the table. It's all right. So the city, you've been working city transit for what?
31 years.
31 years.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't get the answer to this question, but I wondered is it just your naiveness as a kid where you see the city as one way and then you grow up and now I'm noticing everything. Facebook is putting everyone's mistakes online, or has the city really gotten more dangerous for people? Have you seen a transition at all in your work?
My route, I go from terminal to terminal, so I'm at City Hall, and I'm at Water Street, I do Westfort, I go up into Current River, that kind of stuff. So, and I've been doing the same for quite some time. The last, we talk about this all the time, 5 years maybe, it's just, and the last 2, they've noticed a huge change. More desperate people, without money, homeless. And we're not, typically the people you see down and out, I mean, the high school kids even, there's probably a couple hundred at any time, couch surfing, homeless, a lot more drugs. We've always known that in Thunder Bay. We're in the north, Kenora, Winnipeg, us, and the little towns, and we have more alcohol abuse. We have for years, and more drugs. But I think, it was said many times that when the hard stuff gets here, crystal meth and things like that we're going to see a change. And we're seeing it now.
Yes.
We are.
I work in treatment, and the kids who come here, they're savvy and they ask around, or, we're out in boats in the city, and, they run into the odd person, they ask them questions. And I remember them saying, like, whoa, this is the untapped market up here. Yeah. Like this place hasn't been tapped yet by, the opioids and this and that. And sooner or later, I'm not saying it was those kids who relayed the information back, but the information gets back to the business people who want to make the money. And then that's what I think we've seen, an influx of people coming in from Ottawa, that the police are dealing with, that are heavily bringing in drugs that are not seen so.
Yeah. Well, when I see it on that City Hall area, we see it different areas in town, and down in Cumberland and stuff like that too. But you see it getting on the bus and people behaving in ways I've never seen. And in the last 2 years, I know I'll tell my wife, and I go, man, I saw this person. I was like, what the hell were they on? And they're on, I don't know what, but. And everyone's looking for that next ecstasy drug, right? Or something, trying to develop something that's going to make them rich. And you'll see every once in a while something will come through town and it doesn't even have a name, and it just messes people up. And we're seeing ODs like we've never seen before. If it wasn't for that naloxone, I think we'd have an epidemic.
Do you guys have to administer naloxone?
We don't know.
No, huh?
No. But we have to more even alcohol, right? More alcohol calls of people, passing out on the bus or seeing them on the side of the road. We're seeing more of that. Just more desperation, more people without money.
Times have gone hard. The city's gone through a big transition, I find, from an industrial-based city that it was in the 70s and 80s to kind of more of a, education, healthcare system city. So with that being said, of those dangers, what have you changed your self-defense programming to coincide, or you still the same thing? And what would you teach to someone in self-defense? I've seen you from a distance teach the women's, and you kind of have a whole modality of it from awareness, and I'd be curious if you could tell me more about that.
So I look at a couple of different ways. I look at clients coming in, and maybe I get one, they're not going to be coming more than once, right? So they come in for an hour to 3 hours. So really important that they understand, the physical part of it's 15%, maybe 10%. Probably 55 to 60% of it is psychological skills, what your mind is telling you in any given moment. 30% is emotional, 25-30% how you're feeling in any given moment. So from teaching them awareness and how to increase their awareness and just street smarts to diffusing skills, really important. Being able to talk somebody down and keep their ego in check. This is working with women, with guys, what starts fights? Testosterone, right? Alcohol. Inability to diffuse the situation. My ego doesn't allow me to. So being able to do that and to understand, the importance of just not getting into this confrontation and letting it go, and, winning isn't the most important thing. Having a goal of being most important, just going home safe at the end of the day. That's so important. Diffusing skills are something that everyone needs to work on. Check their ego and just be able to walk away. The other part of it is that we're not, we come from a nice neighborhood, and you don't see violence that often. You expect that people are going to behave a certain way. They're going to be nice. People will help you. When you see the fringe of society, like the homeless people and people that are living rough lives, hustling for drugs and stuff like that, they don't follow the same rules. They don't have that. Taking something is how they get by every day, and they'll take it with violence, and they become it becomes easy for them, and so the average person, when that happens, there's a huge adrenaline dump, there's this adrenaline spike, and your body right away, your brain stops working, your focus goes, your eyesight goes, your fine motor skills go. Usually you panic, and once you panic, it's done, it's over, you're a victim. There's no moving, there's no doing anything. They say fight or flight. Well, there's fight, there's flight, there's freeze, there's faint, that happens. And most of the time, like I just saw a video where this street kid, he's, you can tell he's been in lots of fights, and he's young, and there's a bunch of ladies, and they just don't see this stuff very often, and he's mouthing off at some lady, and he looks like the Joker in the Batman, just kind of making this great big movement, and he just cuffs this lady, knocks her completely out, and it's on video, and he's chirping at all the rest, and they just sit there. One actually just moves her drink over. They're just all in shock, and there's a whole big group of them, guys too. Not one moves. This kid's probably 14. Wow. Nobody gets up, but they just are not used to seeing that, right? So dealing with that, dealing with what do I do with that when that adrenaline hits and I want to go into that panic mode? How do I keep my brain working? So we go through that kind of stuff as well. And then, how to stand and what to look for, how to know when someone's setting you up to jump you, hit you, punch you, whatever, that kind of stuff. And then we get into the physical. So, if we do they're coming in one time, that could be a 3-hour session. I'll never see them again. So I want them to go away with understanding the importance of that stuff and some skills there. And then just some really simple skills that are based on what happens when you get that adrenaline dump. So, your fine motor skills are gone. Biomechanically, everything's got to work. So I kind of tested things, right? And if biomechanically it doesn't work, out the window. Morally, legally, ethically, it has to. So,
can't get someone's eye.
Can't just take a pen and stick it in their eye or their neck, right? So everything has to kind of fall into place that way. If I notice that I can teach a group of 30 people and they all can get it, I'll teach it. If it's complicated, it's gone. So that's how over 40 years I've kind of evolved. At the same time, if you see that it works out on the street, the wonderful thing today is that there's cameras everywhere.
Yes.
So one of the best training tools is to watch real attacks, right? So I've watched at least 200 knife attacks. They're not easy to watch.
Oh, geez.
A lot of people die.
Oh, yeah. Weird question, where do you get your hands on that?
It's easy on YouTube. There's a site that I have that I go to. There's 200 on one site.
Oh, geez.
And there's people die on them. They're not fun to watch, but you learn. And you learn a lot. And there's a lot of martial art theories and things like that. Well, I've seen 200 of them, and people attack very much the same, and it's brutal. It's a great learning tool, right? So you can tell what works and what doesn't work right away. So that's evidential, right? I want through evidence. I've seen this works. Yeah, I'll teach it. I don't know if that's going to work. It's out. And it's some simple stuff. And then it's just like you training the kids in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, or I'm training a boxer, or I'm training we need resistance. So, and just increasing that resistance all the time. So you can start slow, but say I got somebody like Braid who's starting to train a little bit more. She knows how to do like come in and I choke her. She knows how to get out of that. She's really good at it now. Well, maybe then you have somebody else come in from behind, put a knife on her or something like that. You always got to increase the resistance. That doesn't happen in the self-defense world. It's weird. We had two of our MMA guys, Trent and Devin, fighting MMA fight recently, and Devin's fighting again soon. You've seen how hard those guys trained, right? Our MMA program now, for people that don't know, they train in our regular boxing, our regular kickboxing, wrestling, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then twice a week we put it all together. And it's been working phenomenal. These guys are a year training, they're prepared. Our last show, they looked like the pros on, there was one pro on that he was an elite pro, and those two guys were up there, and they were heads and tails above everybody else, and that's a short amount of time for training. So they do this kind of work, and yet in the self-defense world, you're up against typically somebody skilled in violence, meaner, on drugs, wants something of yours and doesn't care about you, and is going to hurt you, and they're usually big, whatever. Violent people don't go and pick on some huge guy. They try to find a victim. And yet, when you watch the training, it's like, somebody comes up and they choke and you get out of it and you giggle, and it's so far removed from what you actually need. It's scary.
I remember a small story that I worked in a group home, and this was pre-jiu-jitsu days. And we progressive management of aggressive behavior is PMAB is what we do. And it's one of those where, you do kind of dance choreography moves. Oh, when a kid chokes you, you do this, when you do that. And we had them all, and you get in, get out, and your 3 hours, you get accredited. Okay, you're safe to work. And a kid put me in a rear naked choke. So people don't know what rear naked choke is. Behind you, he's got his arm fully around your neck, and he's choking a group home kid. And I was sitting on stairs. So I couldn't fall forward, and I couldn't fall back because he had more leverage because he was sitting higher in stairs. He had me. Had he chosen to, he was mad, and he chose to let it go. If he didn't want to let it go, I would have been unconscious, and he could have done whatever he wanted to. He could have did whatever. Could have stomped me. So, that's my small testament to how real. And this kid was like 14. Like, you know what I mean? It only took him a second to get his arm around the back of my neck and lock it on, and I couldn't do anything. I felt so helpless. Like, it's back to that analogy. If you don't train real, it's like saying you've never had a day of swimming and go jump into 12 feet of water. You can flail as hard as you want, get kick and thrash, you're going to drown, right?
For sure. And then on top of it, then you're going through, what was that I learned? But never mind that adrenaline dump that happens and the panic. I'm going. So the victim is like, I can't believe this is happening, or and that's it. You're done. It's over, right? So I would keep it super simple. The brain, when something happens, it looks for an answer, and it goes into your memory banks, right? And it starts searching, and when it doesn't find anything, we typically, that's it. We just freeze.
Yes.
Training realistically it's difficult. I won't do it at level 1 for this Sunday coming up, I'm doing a 3-hour course.
You're doing women's self-defense?
Awesome. So this is the third one, and then we'll do a level 2 down the road. So the people that did the first one that want to come in and take it a little bit higher, they can, a little more resistance. Well, we get to some good stuff, they'll do a little bit of knife defense, ground, a little bit of everything, but just super simple stuff that works. And you also got to look at levels, right? Like maybe you're in a group home and, certain things you just can't do to this kid, to the point where you got somebody that really wants to hurt you or wants to take your kid or whatever, where all bets are off. You need those skills too, right? I
just watched a video before I came here. It just by happen came up, and it's the Gracies were teaching when your child gets abducted. If you do see your child get abducted, and they studied it, and they said that everybody naturally their mind goes to their child. Like, get that kid back. They lose all cognition in their brain, and they get tunnel vision for the kid. And it's like the completely wrong approach. You should be getting the person or getting the vehicle description or getting, information. Like it's just your brain tells you exactly the wrong thing to do almost in that situation.
Interesting.
So
it's like, I guess what they're thinking of is like an airplane going down, right? And the mask pumps out, instead of trying to give it to your kid and then you pass out, you put your own on and then you can help others around you. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, they're doing some pretty cool stuff with, spreading the word. The Helio, their grandfather wanted to see it everywhere, and it's happening.
Yes.
I mean, it's in every country. When we started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, it was in Brazil. That was it. There was maybe a black belt living here or there, but it was really few and far between. We actually got Daniel Moroney, was the first Canadian-born black belt, and we got him to come to Thunder Bay, and he's been working with us. That was 2000, 2001. He's been working with us ever since. We were lucky, to do that. But yeah, those guys have spread it everywhere. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's needed too, especially. That's my hope, that eventually it could be on par with kind of like wrestling, in the sense that it's kind of like a bully-proof program that's in place, that kids are getting that hands-on.
Yeah.
If people wanted to find out more information about Leading Edge, where would they go?
We're online. Our new website will come out pretty soon, and we have a website up right now, so just leadingedgemma.com. Facebook, we do a lot on Facebook, on just our public page, just Leading Edge. We're just down on Mooney Street, 385 Mooney. Stop in any night and come on down and try out a class. We always give you, I've directed people to other martial arts, other classes, other gyms. There are some, like every city, the martial arts is the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's the same in Thunder Bay. And you guys got to go out, and I believe really get in there, try a couple classes, no charge, see if we have what you're looking for. If not, I'll help you find a place based on your goals, And I think that's I'm not a great salesman that way. I want people to be happy.
Yeah, you're hands-on.
I want them to be happy, right? And there is I believe in the martial arts for everyone, combat sports, whatever. There is something for you, and and I'll help you find it if we don't have it.
It's almost found when you do it right, it's almost vocational. It's like you could pump it out like a business, and you could get the numbers in there, and you can homogenize it into a program, but it's a people thing. It's hard to quantify, right? Like I work in the child and youth work career, and it's like it's hard to quantify what you do in a day, because you can have one deadly conversation or a deadly training session with someone where they get something that they may have not gotten in a class, because you spent an extra half hour with them on the side, where it's very hands-on. It's so unique in that sense where you can't quantify it, and well, you can belts and stuff like that, but that doesn't really mean much. Belts are just colored up in that way.
But belts are very much a North American thing, right? So a lot of martial arts had none. It was white. Yeah, it got dirty, it got darker, it got black, but you're seeing that with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu too. You're starting to see where it's really in North America now, and you're seeing some of the rules and stuff that we saw from some of the traditional martial arts that just are ridiculous, and you wouldn't see Brazilians do it, but and people love their belts. It's really tough in some systems. Thing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's a combat sport, so it's good to have your basics, and everyone does an armbar the same, but everyone does a triangle. There's a good way to do a triangle, but there's no cookie cutter, right? If you look at a good example is Machado brothers. There's 5 of them. They're all world champs, and they all fight. They all do an armbar the same. They do a really good technical armbar, but they all fight totally opposite of each other. You have one that's kind of flying all over the place. You got the Higgin, who used to just squash people. You had Carlos, who's really fast and moving around, but they all had flawless technique, and they learned those basics, and then they developed their system from their own flair to it based on solid basics, and that was one of the things that I always tried to do, and give people good solid basics, and then let them develop. All of my fighters were like that. You had some that were more strikers, some more grapplers. It wasn't a cookie cutter formula, because then I miss out on your strengths. And I do know gyms like that. Well, we're heavy wrestlers, always take them down, always ground and pound them. And then people figure it out, and maybe that's not your strength. Maybe you're not good at that. We have different body types, different mentalities too. Some are counter punchers, counter strikers. Some are very aggressive. We work to their strengths, right? And ground too. Just that one Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Teach them really good basics, and they'll develop their style themselves. That's where that aliveness comes in. It's so important. You got to have some kind of sparring, some kind of ability to do things alive, and that seems
the art
simple
almost,
enough.
Like the martial, like you say, it's a martial art, and that's where the artistry almost comes in a little bit, where you can put your own, because that's what jiu-jitsu, you see, like most people who do jiu-jitsu are, have degrees and are nerds, and
sure.
like it's just, and you see people play it different. You see the athletes come in who are the high school wrestlers and do jiu-jitsu, and then you see like the guys who are working. You see doctors, from teachers to everything doing it. It's super.
We have
cool.
a lot of engineers. It's funny.
Yes,
it's a very much a thinking man's, and it's a cult, man. Those guys who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's one of the best bang for your buck, because if you stand around that gym, somebody's training at some point. Morning, noon, and night, evening. There's always somebody training, and it's cool.
Now I was curious to ask, because we're touching on leading edge, and the last kind of place I want to go through. It's funny. I kind of like imagine it as the mob. Like, you're a coach. You got in, you've affected so many people. Do you see yourself ever getting out, or is this something that's, where's your transition now? Because you mentioned your age a little bit, you mentioned retirement. What is the future of leading edge, and you and your career and your passion of doing it? What does that look like in the future?
Wow. So I'm figuring that out.
Not to put you on the spot with that in the gym, but just in general.
That's... there's lots going on right now. So just my own training and training with people. One, I've probably learned more in the last 2 or 3 years than I ever have, and I'll continue with that. Training, online with this guy and doing my own stuff, and I love doing that. I'll continue with that. The gym, what I'd like to see is slowly getting out of. I'll head coach for a while. I love coaching the boxing right now and that kind of stuff, overseeing stuff, working the MMA. But I'd like to bring in some younger blood for sure. As I hope to retire next year from the city, and right now I'm doing a lot of work with Indigenous groups. Next week I'll go up to a Northern Reserve. I'll have a group in on Friday. I have a group. We put a proposal in to start what we do at Leading Edge at a Northern Reserve.
Delico came by the other day. Asking for you. They said they have money to put into a program.
I have so many people. So much. Like, I've probably worked with almost every agency, Indigenous agency in town at some point over the last 2 years, and people are really seeing, combat sports, how it changes lives. It builds such self-esteem, and people feel so good about themselves when they train in it. And think, wow, promoting violence. I had so many people that come in that were violent people that and it ended that day that they got in, because sometimes they just need an outlet for their. So I have so many ideas, right, that I want to do. So I think I'll stay working at Leading Edge, and that's a big part of it. But I definitely like to bring some younger blood in as owners and coaches and stuff like that. I've been working on an idea called Mentor a Champ, and I'd really like to work with the Indigenous kids. Finding these kids, bringing them into our environment that we have. We have a really positive environment with so many great people. So you get, a kid that's interested in boxing or jiu-jitsu, I match him up with a mentor, just checks on him, see, school's going, hey, you missed class today, whatever, how you doing, go out and talk. That changes lives. Having somebody that's interested in you changes lives. Having a positive environment changes lives. And then getting them to, or you have a group of guys who want to go back to, their northern community and start up what we do. Nice. Go up there, every month or every couple of months and work with them. But having somebody that goes back there and lives there and does a program like we have would be would
That'd
be
be
life-changing.
Yeah, I almost think of that with the kids Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that I teach. Like, I could teach it to almost, like, it's so cross-diverse. Like, it can go into so many environments and just be so affluent, I find. So I'd love to see it spread in that way.
Yeah, so we're working on that right now, and that would be, you know, one of my goals.
When you say we, is that with a particular organization, or is that
a few of them? Yeah, working with a few of them right now. I do a lot of work with Onma. They've been a huge supporter of our gym, and we get all their people in. We're starting to get their clients in. I love the work they're doing. Man, they're changing lives. They have all kinds of programs going, and Oshki, PMOsh, they do an education, the education out of Centennial Square, and going up to some northern reserves with them. There's 6 that we have slated, so I'll start that Thursday. So
I've noticed that in recent years, they're kind of getting, social welfare organizations are kind of getting, I don't want to say the right idea, but just a different lens of like, hey, let's get positive into the people's lives instead of, you know, kind of oversight, and it's just a different modality that I think is going to have a positive impact, and I'm super excited to see where that goes for the gym.
Yeah, you know, I think, well, what we talked about, that just being in the moment, you know, we don't get enough of that anymore, right? We're losing ourselves, you know, we're our social media, and we're just bombarded with stuff all day long. These poor kids, like, do they ever get a moment where they just get to sit quietly, right? There's an old saying, I think it was Pascal that had said it, you know, that all humanity's problems come from the inability to sit alone in a room. And that's an old quote. Today that's like 100 times more valid. And you know, there is 2 parts to us. We have that ego, and we have that higher self, and you need that quiet. That the ego is loud, and it's always, and if it's bombarded with noise, you never hear that higher self, right? And I think that's where, as humanity, that's our evolution. There's been people that, you know, they're enlightened, whatever it may be, that come from that space. That's where we will go, but we'll never get there without having, you know, quiet time and just to go inward. That's where our way out of, we talk about what's going on in Thunder Bay and society, that's our way out, is to go inwards, right? And to become better people, to be less judgmental, and to be kinder to each other, you know, and we have our circle that we meet every day, and to just really go out in the morning and just be real in those interactions with people, right? And you know, and they're noticing that's it. Combat sports is one of those ones that get them there a little bit at a time, right? And that's what I loved about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. It gets people in the moment. That just doesn't happen anymore.
Yes, it does. And I find, maybe where I want to leave this conversation off, and it was an Aboriginal elder who taught me this, and I'd love to have him on the podcast at one time, but he said people need 4 basic things, and I think leading edge, and when you join something, creates that identity, that belonging, the purpose, and self-esteem. You get those all filled. Like when you throw on a leading edge shirt, and like you've said to me, you know, I've made mistakes in my life, you know, that you're aware of. Other people in the gym have, you know, a lot of people have, and it's a family. It's when you put on leading edge, you're part of the family. For sure. And people feel that. They feel like, wow, these guys like me. They like training with me. So you get that identity, you get that belonging. You're like, you're not looking, oh, I'm out there causing trouble. I'm out here learning something cool. You know, your self-esteem starts growing, and you're like, I got a purpose. Maybe I can, whether your purpose is out there in the world or it's in there teaching or whatever, you find your purpose. That's what I've noticed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has done for me. Like, it's, like I said, it's turned down all the other things and kind of like it's replaced, right? They say that with addictions especially. It's like you don't get rid of addictions by just cutting it out and grinding your teeth with willpower. You got to fill your cup with other things, right? So there's no room for the garbage to come in. And so that's where my big thank you to you is you've helped me with my life tremendously, so I appreciate that. And I'm sure you've affected, I know you probably haven't heard that from, you probably hear that all the time, but it's been dramatic in my life, so I really appreciate it. And I know I probably say thank you on behalf of hundreds of people, so I think I want to leave it at that. And it's just it's awesome.
Thanks for having me today.
It's been a pleasure, Matt. Awesome. Thank you.